Lovely to see everybody. And let's just take a moment to ground as people are arriving and as we're arriving. So really using the opportunity of this moment of coming to stillness with our body to invite our mind also to slow down and to arrive here. Not as a forcing, but allowing the stilling of the body to invite our mind. Do you like to settle somewhat, to gather somewhat, to maybe noticing the space around our body that is almost imperceptibly, and yet in some very real way, giving us room to be here, welcoming us here as we gather also in Sangha and in community. This intention to touch into the Dharma, to meditation, to share together in community. So just letting ourselves land in this listening here. So we'll just sit quietly for a couple of minutes and then I'll lead into the session. Okay, so welcome everybody. Just to, for anybody who is new to these sessions, just to say that I'm Sumedha, one of the core teachers with Sacred Mountain Sangha. And this session lasts for an hour, where there'll be a guided meditation and some teaching. And then for anybody who wants to stay on another 15 minutes after the hour, there'll be a moment for questions or sharing. So that's roughly how the session goes. And we can start with some chanting, as we often do in these sessions. I know that Adam's leading a lovely chanting series at the moment, so maybe some of you are going to that. And thank you, Michael has just put in the chat the link to the chanting book for anybody who wants that, and I'll also share screen with people. So let me just find the share screen button. Okay, Michael, could you please put the original sound for musicians on? I can't access the buttons. There we go. All right, can everybody see that? Yeah, great. So as many of you know, chanting is quite a significant part of what Sacred Mountain Sangha offers as a way into practice and a way of nourishing our practice. And it's really worth remembering that the teachings often that we study or that we receive have been chanted orally, is how they were passed down. And there's something about bringing our mind, our body, our voice to a recollection and really bringing that vibration through us that can be, it can affect us actually, it can touch us and help things to shift internally. So in terms of our understandings. So for anybody who wishes to join in, we'll chant first of all the refuges and the precepts, and then I'll let you know the other chants as we go through. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Panatipata Vedamani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intentionally taking life. Adinadana Vedamani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sumichachara vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from misuse of sexuality and the senses. Musawada vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from speech that is false, divisive, harsh, and meaningless. Sura meraya majapamadatana vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training to refrain from intoxication which leads to carelessness. And then we can go down and chant the recollection of the triple jewel. And we'll chant it here in Pali, but it's really worth reading through the English and contemplating what this might mean in your own heart and being. Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijacharana sampano sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati sata deva manusanam buddho bhagavati sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanaiko Pachatang Veditavo Vinyuhi iti supatipano bhagavato sawaka sangho ujupatipano bhagavato sawaka sangho nyaya patipano bhagavato sawaka sangho Samichi patipano bhagavato sawaka sangho yadidam chatari purisa yugania tapurisa pugala esa bhagavato sawaka sangho ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anutarang Punya Ketam Lokasati. And then we can go to the chant on the 4 Brahma Viharas, so the boundless qualities of heart that are said to be natural qualities within our being. And as we chant them and contemplate them, it's like we can be helping them to awaken and suffuse through our own being and also into the world that we're part of. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with compassion. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with gladness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with equanimity. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And then we'll chant one of the mantras together. So we can chant the Buddhang one day, which is the third mantra down on the screen that I've just shared. And it's a chant that is honoring the Buddha, so that which is awakened within us, as well as the historical being, the Dharma, or the teachings, or even one translation is nature, and Sangha, or the community that we can sense that we're part of. So we'll do a few repetitions, so if you don't know it, you can pick it up. Buddhang, Buddhang, Buddhang Vande, Dhamma, 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 Sangha, Sangha, Sangha Vande, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha Vande, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha Vande, Dhamma, 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 Sangha, Sangha, Sangha Vande, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha Vande, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha Vande, Dhamma, Dhamma, Sangha, 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 Buddha, Buddha, Sangha, so feeling into the effects of the chanting, maybe the resonance through our body, and the kind of gathering that comes from bringing our mind together with our voice, our heart, our body. Or even if the chants you weren't so resonant with them, just feeling into the sense of your body settling here. As we can be present with all conditions. In a listening, attentive way. And for this meditation, I want to really invite us to bring our attention into our body however we can. Maybe the weight inviting us down towards the earth. The sense of contact with the earth underneath us. Though we're not balanced here, we're settling allowing ourselves to drop like a water drop down towards the earth. And feeling the contact of the earth under our bottom, under our feet, under our back, we're lying down. And just really noticing the steadiness there of that contact. And if it's helpful, you can even imagine like being a tree and sending roots down into the earth, sensing the nourishment that this earth gives us. How our body is intimately interwoven with the earth, the air, the water, the warmth. It's held by space. Just letting ourselves rest in these perceptions, which may be inhabitual to notice. Notice how different it is than when we are maybe giving most of our attention to our preoccupations, what we need to do, may not need to do, even in meditation. Noticing we have this different mode of listening where we can attune and rest into what is already here for us. The support and nourishment of the earth that we're part of. That we can honor. That we're nourished each breath by the air, by water, by warmth. Welcomed by space. Intimately supported by life. And yet often we don't give this time or attention or listening. So as we settle in this way, can you allow the steadiness, the nourishment, to maybe settle and nourish our heart, our way of experiencing? our ways of responding. Remembering that we can come back to this way of listening and tuning at any moment we can ground inside, stabilize, refresh our way of seeing things. By just remembering to attend to the earth, touch the earth, remember our breath. And we're nourished so by water, by warmth, by space each moment. Let that hold as reminders we can be grounded in our presence and respond from this deep alignment and listening. And our awakening heart as we touch the earth. We can end the meditation there and really bringing with you any threads that feel resonant and anything that isn't, just letting it flow on. This week I wanted to really I follow on from the session last week, which is, as many of you know, was a celebration and fundraiser for Earth Day. So, and I really like what Linda said in that session, that Earth Day can be every day. And yet there was a particular reminder last week to honour the earth, to give time and attention. And it was also, all the dana went to Amazon Watch, which is a beautiful movement of what do we want to tune into and what do we want to support, both with our attention, our time, our resources, in different ways, which can be a very alive question, all of the time, actually. And it was very resonant for me because something that I've always appreciated in the stories of the Buddha, so the stories and the myths maybe that have come down and the meaning of those, is that when the Buddha was, it's said that when the Buddha was in the process of awakening, so he was on the point of awakening and he was assaulted by the forces of Mara, or the forces of delusion. And what he did at that time was to touch the earth. Okay, so 2 people are saying the volume is low. I'm as close, I'm pretty close. Are other people having problems with the sound? No? Some people are saying it's fine. Okay, so okay, so a few people are saying it's fine. So I'll carry on and I'll try and speak more loudly. So, so yeah, the Buddha touched the earth as his witness in his awakening process, which I just find to be a beautiful image, because there can be this sense of, like in spirituality, that we're getting out of suffering by getting out of the kind of whole messiness of human life. And there are many teachings and ways of examples that the Buddha gave where that was clearly not the case. But this image of touching the earth at the point of awakening to steady and to meet and to counter the forces of delusion, I find incredibly powerful and incredibly real. And alongside that, the earlier in his kind of move towards finding a way of liberation from suffering. As many of you know, he went through lots of extremes and lots of striving and mortification of the body, and then he had a memory of being a child sitting at the foot of a rose apple tree, and he remembered the sense of deep well-being that arose in him, leaning against a tree. And that became the kind of taste of what might be a way of liberation. So there are these different references in the teachings where there's a very strong encouragement for me to taste into what is naturally supportive to us, to steady the heart so that we can start to see more clearly how we might meet suffering and release that which can be released. So and it's also very clearly said in the teachings that that a hindered mind, so we all have our hindrances, our like anger or our like laziness, say, or agitation, or like these can be called hindrances, but essentially for me it's like how we work with them that is a question. So the Buddha said that the difficulty with a hindered mind is just that we don't see clearly what is for our own well-being, for the well-being of others, or the well-being of both. So it's not like they're all bad and wrong. It's like when we're caught in them, we can't see clearly what is for our own well-being, the well-being of others, or the well-being of both. And the image that is given is another natural image of like a bowl of water. So in ancient India, apparently to see your reflection, you would look in a bowl of water. And if the water's bubbling or it's got algae, you don't see clearly. If the water is clear, you see clearly what is harmful. And so this for me very much tunes into what this theme of touching the earth can offer us in terms of how it can give us a way of seeing that helps us to see more clearly what is harmful or not. So this is a bit what I want to explore this week. So there are some key things about touching the earth that I think can really help us to have a sense of grounding, of connecting, help us to steady and discern in this way more clearly that which is for well-being of our own and of others, of life in general. So one of the things as we touch the earth, like having that sense of it, is that there's a gathering, isn't there, of our being, our body and mind. So often, I don't know what your mind's like, but my mind, when it's left unattended, is it likes to run away and it likes to do all sorts of things that you know I'm not necessarily okay with, but it kind of have its life as its own. There was a teacher, Nathan Glide, who I know, who he was quoting somewhere else, but he was just like, the mind is shameless. It will do anything, you know, which I really like. It's true. It'll just get up to all sorts of things. But we're not necessarily, we're not wanting to get caught in, but without a ground, without a steadiness, it's very difficult not to get caught. So this image of touching the earth and of coming back into our body, of touching the steadiness of the earth, this creates a certain taste in our mind of steadiness, of groundedness, of anchoredness, the capacity to know we can guide our attention to something which steadies, very much helps to clear the lens by which we see. So, I mean, in broad terms, in Buddhist teaching, it's said that samadhi or concentration and vipassana, insight, all ways of seeing that reduce suffering, are interconnected, and we can really see this. It's like if our mind isn't grounded, isn't steady, it's very hard to get a new perspective, to see clearly. So touching the earth is one of the ways in which, for me, there's that reminder to ground, to steady, to unite our being. And in that way, we start to listen differently to what we're receiving, internally or externally, and we have more capacity to respond in a way that can recognize that which is harmful and let go of it, cultivate that which is wholesome. And as we gather in our being, as we come into our body, an embodied way of knowing, like notice, say, how the mind, when it's unattended, it goes into all sorts of different speeds, and it can go very far, it can go very fast. It has this kind of untethered capacity, which can be brilliant, you know, in its own way. It can be very creative. But if it's not grounded, for me, we tend to lose a sense of connectedness with ideas and concepts. And so as we come into a gatheredness of our being, notice that our body's way of knowing is often much slower. It's much more rhythmic. It offers us these possibilities of different time frames and the perspectives that brings. It brings us back into a kind of natural context also, where we recognize the time frames that are involved in cycles of life, say. And we feel that in a feeling way. So our very way of knowing changes. So, for instance, when the Buddha invites us to recognize what is very real as we touch the earth, which is our vulnerability, our propensity to age, to get sick, to die. If we receive that, there are certain forms of pain, say, that are inevitable in being born in a human body, or a mortal body. And the Buddha is asking us to look at the realities of being born in a mortal body, to recognize our vulnerability, but to do that with a perspective of this touching the earth. The perspective that then doesn't need to deny that, but can honor, say, that we're part of the cycles of life. How do I then want to live my being when I'm part of this cycle of life, when I recognize that I have a certain amount of time? So the Buddha said then the perspective that can bring is rather one of the preciousness of our life, and how do we want to use it, an urgency. So it reprioritizes. Just from this simple fact, if I touch the earth, I allow my mind to touch the reality of being part of these natural cycles. And then, of course, in doing this, as we allow ourselves to touch the earth more and more, and this is what I really love also, is that it can bring a very deep sense of interconnectedness. And just remembering that the Buddha was clearly an extraordinary being, and discovered this, or listened to this ancient path of how to liberate ourselves from suffering. And he, in touching the earth, there's this recognition for me that it's interwoven with the web of life. We need the earth, we need nature, from which to learn, from which to help us to hold steady, from which to give back what we're awakening also. So the Buddha didn't wake up in a like bubble. It's like, no, I touch the earth, I'm helped by the qualities of nature, and I can give back into this awakenedness into this world. So I find this really beautiful, because it's almost like a doorway opens into how can we be with awake presence in this life, both listening and giving back. And as we explore the teachings of touching the earth, they explore how we are interwoven, whether it's through the elements, whether it's through the beings who we're in contact with, human, non-human. So Thich Nhat Hanh has lovely 5 beautiful touching the earth contemplations, where it also brings us into like the lineage of, say, our ancestors, our spiritual teachers, the land, the beings that we love and support, the beings that we find difficult. All of this, it brings it into the field of how do I keep a heart of listening, of steadiness, of responsiveness, of honoring that which needs to be honored, of letting go that which is harmful. So it's a very profound, it brings relationship essentially in our liberation. And so as I was contemplating this, I was really noticing, oh yes, as we do that, our sense of ethics maybe changes. So we were chanting the precepts at the beginning of the session. And, you know, like sometimes as we touch into this, it can be like, oh, there, somehow I'm doing it right or wrong, or something like this. Whereas actually it can be a sense of, how do I engage in this life in a way that I'm honoring that which is deepest in my own being, and that which I wish to support in the world. And so the precepts are just mirrors, but the sense of the root of ethics comes from, like for me, touching very deeply into the sense of interconnectedness. So the vision changes. It's no longer should, right, wrong, imposed, not imposed. It's like, what am I contemplating, and what do I want to bring through? So that's another very clear way in which our perspective can shift in touching the earth. Or say in contemplating, in touching the earth, I've become more and more aware of how we're like there's a generosity in life that is happening. We're nourished actually. We're nourished many times a day with food, with water, with air, with the ground underneath our feet. And many of us are very lucky. We're in relatively safe spaces. So we can use our mind to contemplate the generosity of the life that we're part of, also the beauty, or the way that life tries to rebalance itself, even though with pollution and the way that we're living, it's becoming harder and harder. But for me, there's a fundamental generosity in life that goes against then the sense of individualism, of like just consuming, of getting what we need, of guarding it. It's more like, well, how do I, okay, so honor the needs of my being, but recognize what do I want to give back? What attitude do I hold? When I'm feeling fear around some kind of material thing, like how can I contemplate that in a way that I feel balanced in my response? Because there's a lot of ways in which, certainly in Western society, we've become very, for our security, where there's a sense of like we need to keep consuming, or we need to keep guarding. And it's not to deny our needs, but if we put ourselves back in the context of life, then our sense of what do we need to receive and what can we let go of? become very different. So the sense of renunciation becomes one of letting go of things that are no longer in alignment with life. So it can really touch us very deeply. And I felt very touched years ago by an article that Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote that I've mentioned before, called Moving from a Culture of Death to a Culture of Life. And he talks basically about how in Western society, we value has been reduced to basically financial value. And so kind of products, but also beings become just commodities. Land becomes just commodities. We treat each other as objects. And in that way, we become, our capacity to extend resonance of empathy and compassion becomes very difficult. And so his vision in this article is like which is really lovely in the context of a Buddhist teaching that teaches of non-self. He talks about like really coming back to a sense of subjectivity within everything, that we honor the life within everything, within our own being, within other human beings, non-human beings, natural beings like nature. So I can put the reference to that in the links at the end, or on the YouTube channel. But it's for me, what is pivotal in this is this shifting of perspective, where our sense of capacity to respond to life in a way that lets go of harm as much as we can gets transformed. And that a root of that is in touching the earth, honoring our interconnectedness. And that then there's a paradox of like, as we're invited by touching the earth, touching our body to acknowledge our vulnerability, maybe that can open us into a sense of our sharedness, our wish to develop compassion, that we're all part of this predicament, and how do we wish to honor life? And that as well, there's something which I really find it's quite I find very beautiful. There's a kind of paradox that as we touch the earth, as we come into our practice, there can be a sense of coming into a certain deep listening within our own being. And the Buddha talked about this sense of solitude in this listening. So he called it viveka, like seclusion of the mind. And it's like, as we allow ourselves to come into very deeply touching the earth, touching into our body, there can be a certain sense of bringing our listening a bit out of the kind of habitual ways of human interaction, or the habitual ways of our mind. But the paradox of this is it's not for disconnecting, it's for deeply connecting with the root within our being that then allows us to open more profoundly to the life we're part of, both human and non-human. So there's a whole world of resources, the elements, nature, plants. So Joanna Macy, many of you know, the environmental activist, she talks about the different qualities, the plants that we can learn from, like what might inspire us, the tenacity of a dandelion or something. And that all of this resource is here, and that we do need to somewhat deepen and align our listening, which can be a movement of somewhat seclusion, but it's for deep connection. So it's that rooting down to come back deeper into life. And that this nourishes and literally grounds us in the face of the ways in which our mind can get us involved in delusion, because we're rooted, we're grounded, we know where we want to center our heart and how to mirror our own mind. So I want to quote a little bit actually from Joanna Macy on the sense of power as process. So as we deepen in this way that I've been talking about and the kind of perspectives that can bring, it can really change, say, our perceptions and ways of being in the world. So she says, in terms of power as process, as open systems dependent upon larger evolving systems, we must stay open to the wider flows of information, even when certain information seems inimical to our self-interest, where the needs of the whole and other beings within that whole are seen as commensurate with our own. Only then can we begin to think and act together. For this, we need a boundless heart. And this, I believe, we have within us by virtue of our nature as open systems, which we touch when we touch the earth. If we can grieve with the griefs of others, so by the same token, by the same openness, can we find strength in their strengths, bolstering our individual supplies of courage, commitment, and endurance. How does power as process, power with rather than power over, operate in our lives? We don't own it. We don't use it like a gun. We can't measure its quantity or size. We can't increase it at our neighbour's expense. Power is like a verb. It happens through us. We experience it when we engage in interactions that produce value. We have such interactions with loved ones and fellow citizens, with music, art, and literature, with seeds we plant, or with materials we shape. Such synergistic exchanges generate something that was not there before and that enhances the capacities and well-being of all who are involved. Power with involves attentive openness to the surrounding physical or mental environment and alertness to our own and others' responses. It is the capacity to act in ways that increase the sum total of one's conscious participation in life. So I find that very beautiful and very powerful, that phrase that we can have a way of being in our being that we enhance our conscious participation in life. And so there's something about the image of the Buddha coming to the point of the awakened heart and touching the earth and calling up, needing to call on those resources to steady. And also what he then did with those teachings, that it's that coming to the center to be able to engage with life in a way that consciously honors and participates and reduces our propensity to harm. So then this brings me to, like, as many of you know, I really love the sense of the word Namo, translated as like in the sense of the refuges, as Kittisaro and Tanisara talk about this as I return my life. And so it becomes that our practice becomes like very deeply rooted in this interconnected web of life. And it makes sense in terms of we're bringing our awakening through the whole of our being, and we're honoring also the teachings and nature. So one translation of Dharma is nature. And we're also, and this I really love, is the sense of ever-growing community. So a bit like, you know, like first of all, we might sense into our community as those that we love, and then we might sense into our community as all that which nourishes us within the earth. And then slowly, as we start to allow that to work with delusion in our own heart, learn what to let go of, we can maybe extend our heart to those people or beings we feel neutral towards, or who are we feel may be causing harm. How do we stay resourced and meet those forces in a way that we really are learning to meet delusion in a way that to release as much harm as possible. So this is the energy of compassion. And as Thich Nhat Hanh said, the real enemy of man, the real enemy of all of us, is delusion. So we need to find our resource to meet that. So yeah, and that all of this was there 2000 and something years ago is quite incredible. And yet how much we still need to be practicing with it in our days. So really very deeply. Yes, and somebody's just mentioned in the chat, which is very, very beautiful, that that if we listen to nature and we cherish our interconnection and reciprocity, we really understand that we're not alone. And that's very, very important. Also on this journey, it's like this beautiful dynamic that in each moment we're not alone, we're nourished, and also we give back with each drop of presence that we can bring, each drop of responsiveness. And the lovely image in the Dhammapada, one of the early teachings, where it's like just as a water jar fills drop by drop, each drop of presence, we're bringing that through. So I think I've said enough. So there's, I hope there was something in there that was helpful. And after, if anyone who wants to stay on, we'll have questions and sharing. But if anyone is going to leave, there are just a few announcements before you do. So one of which is that the chanting circle, the Guardians of the Sacred, calling in a ceasefire through ceremony, meditation, and direct action, begins again on Monday, April the 29th. So if any of you would like to join that, please do. It's a really, really great event. And then there's an in-person retreat also called Peace and Healing Through Embodied Presence with Kittisaro and Tanisra. So that's on June the 1st and June the 2nd. So you can find both of those in the chat. I'll maybe copy and paste them just to make sure that you get them in the chat. Yeah, blessings.